And I always say it was my dream job until it wasn't. So
how did you know when it wasn't? So many questions.
I love it. I mean, I think I think if anyone is feeling that right now, like before you might get excited about what's happening. You might get excited about the things you're working on. You might look forward to what's to come. And then you just get bored. You get frustrated. You feel stagnant. You feel lost.
Right.
Lost because you're like, this is what I wanted.
Exactly.
So now I don't want this. And what do I want?
Right.
What am I doing? Like, what's happening right now? So once we get into the process, it's like, okay, what do you want? And how do we go after what you want without having to sacrifice the skills you've already gained, the things that you desire? And so a part of that process is really like getting clarity on what that next career move is that allows them to still show up as a top candidate for those roles, while also stepping into an opportunity that is interesting and that makes them feel excited about their career again.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about, when someone's looking to get that promotion or that raise, what should they focus on when it comes to this? Like, they're about to step into the office, have a conversation with management. What are the steps? Because I fail in this. It is really hard for me to advocate for myself, to be honest.
I think you hit the nail on the head, advocating for yourself.
What would you say is the biggest mistake someone can do when they are negotiating their salary?
You know what's funny? I think the biggest mistake is not negotiating. And I always...
I fall in this bracket. I never advocate for myself. But okay, go on. Okay, so...
Let's talk about it. Because...
I don't know why.
Because this is what I always say. Never let gratitude talk you out of your coins.
What is the secret sauce to land the perfect job? Well, we're going to get the answers today because on this episode of Nessa Off Air, we are joined by someone who is amazing at what they do, and that is exactly what they do for a living. They help you get to the finish line, your dream job, okay? So today we are joined by career strategist. I would look at this person as a career coach, right? They want to help you, whether it's negotiating a salary, whether it's you trying to get a new job. When should you get a new job? All those questions we're going to get answered today. She is amazing. She also has a career column in Forbes, all right? And also has written for different publications like the New York Times, Bloomberg. I am so happy to welcome Adunola Adeshola to the show. Thank you so much for being here today. And, for everyone who's listening or watching, what do you do? What is a career strategist?
Okay, so a career strategist is, I'll just say what I am. So a career strategist, in my opinion, is someone who can help you strategize the best next move for your career. I could imagine that some other career strategists could focus on different elements, of the career experience. But my focus is on helping you be able to level up in your career, land the job that you desire, make the career move, pivot. And I particularly love being able to help like mid to senior level corporate professionals, because that's when you're really like, okay, what's next? Like, you've done some things already and you're like, what do I do now? Or how do I make this next thing happen? So that's kind of like my expertise. And I love helping them be able to do it without settling for less or starting over, or really the whole like applying to jobs 24/7. Like, we avoid that whole experience.
Really? Okay, so tell me about your experience. How did you get so good at this?
So it's crazy when I say like taking it back a decade, because it doesn't feel like it's been that long. But when I was in college, so first of all, my name is Adunola, so I am Nigerian. And so with being Nigerian American, at that time, it was like you can only be a few things. You can only be a doctor, a lawyer, a nurse, or engineer. And if you're not any of those things, then you probably will be considered close to failure, if not already failing. And so my desire, weirdly, from high school was like, I want to be a PR heel-clacking executive. I don't know why. That's so strange to have that desire. as a sophomore in high school, but that's what I wanted. And so by the time I was ready to graduate, I was like, okay, I got to get a job because everyone already thinks I'm going to be a failure. So I need to figure this out. And so I did the whole like applying the jobs, 20 jobs a week. I did the whole researching what to say in your resume and the cover letter and how to reach out to people. And I did all of it. Like I did it all for almost 6 months. And I remember I was about to graduate. It was a month before my graduation. And I did all of those things, applied to jobs, 20 jobs a week, 10 to 20 at least, did the resume, did the cover letter, reached out to people. And I had 0 interviews. Ooh. 0. Like none. Like
why do you think that is?
So my theory at that time was I realized that process, so what I was doing was what I was told you're supposed to do, right? So you're supposed to put yourself out there, apply for the jobs, do all of these things. But I realized for me, I don't think that worked because it wasn't really how I went about my life in general. Like it was just kind of like transactional. It was inauthentic, like reaching out to these people that I probably didn't even want to talk to, like I just wanted a job, applying for all these jobs. And if I really took a look at it, I didn't really want most of those jobs. I was just like, this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to be applying for these jobs. And so at that moment, I had to take a really hard look at myself and say, okay, this is not working. So let me try a more thoughtful approach. Let me try to be a little bit more strategic instead of just throwing it all out there. And so the funny thing was that a month after that, I graduated college and I landed a job 3 days later because the things that I did in that short amount of time of being thoughtful and strategic worked out so much better than all the things I did 6 months before. And so that was kind of like the birth of me saying like, I think I have something here. Like, and the job that I got was like at the global chairman's office of a international PR firm, one of the top PR firms. Like it was better than all the jobs that I was rejected for 6 months before.
What do you think it was that I guess just unlocked? Like, do you remember doing something different, clearly different than the previous jobs that you applied for?
Yes. So I stopped just clicking easily apply and I stopped just like throwing it out there. Like I was like, what do I really want? Like, what do I really, like if I could have the job that I really want, what would it be? And then I really was like, okay, how would I go about it? And instead of just like instead of just like throwing it out there, I was like, I want to see if I can just reach out and send an email and say like, here's what I think I can bring to the table. And here's all the things that I know that I can contribute. And I would love to have an interview. Here's my resume. And it worked.
Wow.
It worked. And I got an interview. And I remember the interviewer told me that they were interviewing with like people who had PhDs and people who had master's degrees. And mind you, I hadn't even graduated at that point. Like I was like a few weeks from graduation. So I was just like, great, I didn't get the job. So, thank you for that. And funny enough, I got that job. Like I ended up and she wasn't lying. Like there were colleagues who had PhDs and master's degrees and I still got the job. And I think the difference was I really showed up like, this is what I can bring to the table. And this is what I can do. And I'm not just wanting someone to take a chance on me. Here's what I can bring. And I think switching that from just like, I hope someone picks me, I hope someone hires me, anybody please hire me, and really being like, I have value and I understand their needs and I'm being intentional about that. And here's what I can do to solve their problems.
Do you remember what you told them would be the value with you being added to their team? Do you remember?
That's an interesting question because I don't.
I don't.
I don't remember. I don't remember, honestly. I mean, at that time, it honestly makes me, I look back at her, the girl I was at that time, and I'm like, she had balls. Like, she was like very ballsy because like, I will say that I always was one to have things figured out. So I had like a whole 2-year plan prior to this where I'm like, I'm going to get these internships that's going to help me get these jobs. And I was really devastated when that whole 6-month job searching thing didn't work out. But before that, I had these internships. I had crafted this narrative that I felt was necessary to get the type of jobs that I wanted post-graduation. So yeah, I think that I just probably dug back into like, here's what you did to get here.
Right.
So let's talk about it and let's make it valuable to them. So if anything, that's what I think she was probably thinking.
What do you think you took away from working there?
At the time, I was working, again, in the global chairman's office, literally with executives, literally ghostwriting for the CEO, like doing some really cool things. And I ended up making some lateral moves after that. And I always say it was my dream job until it wasn't. So
how did you know when it wasn't? So many questions.
I love it. I mean, I think I think if anyone is feeling that right now, like before you might get excited about what's happening. You might get excited about the things you're working on. You might look forward to what's to come. And then you just get bored. You get frustrated. You feel stagnant. You feel lost.
Right.
Lost because you're like, this is what I wanted.
Exactly.
So now I don't want this. And what do I want?
Right.
What am I doing? Like, what's happening right now? And so I think those are all the feelings that I felt at that time. And then you also kind of feel guilty too.
Right.
Because you're like, I worked hard for this.
Right. So why don't I want this?
Yes. And for a long time, I was like, okay, just be grateful. And I think that's another sign when you're trying to like force yourself into being grateful for something.
Right.
And I think that's a bad thing because gratitude is never meant to keep you stuck. It's actually supposed to open you up, right? Like if I did this, then how much more can I do?
Right.
But when I was there in that situation, I was like, I should just be grateful, smile, get through it. So many people would want this job.
Exactly.
And you tell yourself those things. And I think once you start to try to convince yourself that you should stay put where you are, you are in a place where this is no longer where you're supposed to be. Because if you look back to where you were before, you probably weren't having to convince. You're probably excited. You're probably happy. So I think those are some of the signs.
And then you leap and have your own company called Employee Redefined. What is this?
Yeah.
And how scared were you to launch this?
Yes. I was frightened. Like, I was so scared. I remember calling. So first of all, when I finally decided to leave this job, so it started because I kept waiting for this promotion.
Oh.
And, I had been growing. I had been getting these opportunities, but it was time for the big thing. It was time for the promotion. It was time for the more money, more of this. And I kept getting the like, just wait 6 months. Like, we can't do it now because of budget constraints. And one particular time I was like, it's going to happen. Like, everyone else is getting these promotions. It's like, my turn.
Everyone else was?
Yes. Like, people who started at the same time as me were getting their promotions. While I was also getting compliments. I was getting results. I was people's right hand.
Right.
So I was like, it's going to be my turn now. And I remember going into the office and like this, I wore my nice outfit. I was like, it's happening. And I ended up being in the bathroom crying, like probably by the midday. Man. So I could just tell you how that went. I didn't get the promotion. And so I was like, okay, I need to figure out something else. Like, I can't keep staying here. I can't keep doing this. And so long story short, I ended up using the strategy that I had started using in the past to land a new job 7 weeks later. And it took me being able to say, like, enough is enough. Because I think a lot of it was like, something will happen eventually. Things will change eventually, all of that. And so when I finally left, I had a lot of people who were also in great jobs and even friends in different industries are like, wait, how did you do that?
Right.
And like, wait, I'm miserable too. Like, what's happening here? And so I started having like friends and peers and even like old coworkers who were like, can you help me? And so I was like, okay, sure, I'll help. And they started getting jobs. Wow. And I was like, okay, interesting.
I'm onto something.
I was like, this is okay. So it kind of like snowballed into me saying like, and I always have moments where I'm like, okay, this is working. And I'm like, okay, let's really make it work. And with this, I was like, okay, this is working, but let me take a step back and say, how am I doing this process to make it work? Because like, I have these ideas of how I'm getting it for myself. It's working for other people, but let's take a step back and say, like, what is the strategy behind this? Right. And so that's when I really sat down and said, okay, here's the step-by-step. Let me kind of reverse engineer all of the clients that became clients and show, like, have for myself on paper what this looks like. And so that's kind of how the strategy kind of like organically came to be.
Wow.
But mentally, it was definitely like okay.
You're going to do this. You're going to create a company to help people land their dream jobs.
Yep.
That's not easy.
Nope.
Okay, so when I was reading up about you, you really specialize in helping high achievers really land that dream gig that they've always wanted. How do you define a high achiever in this situation?
So I always laugh and say that like my ideal client
Yes.
is me because
Is you? I love this. Yes.
Because I was once in their shoes, right? Like I was the high achiever who was like, I got all these goals. I mean, you just heard me say I had a 2-year plan in college about how to get a job. Like I was always like, you follow the rules, you do the things, you make it happen. And I think a high achiever is that. Like you're ambitious, you're driven, you have goals, you have things that you want to achieve in life, and you have a track record of actually achieving those things. And you also have other things that people don't necessarily see. And so I like to say, like, on the outside, you look like everything's great. Like you're the goals in your friend group or the goals in your family or the person who everyone's like, you're doing it. But on the inside, you have all this internal noise of like, what am I doing? Or like, what is next? Or like, am I a fraud? Can I really do this? So I think that is how I would describe like a high achiever.
And how do you help them? What's step number one? Is it getting someone's mental right?
Yeah.
Or like, what do you do to nurture them to understand that, yes, you can land the dream gig of your life?
Yeah. It's funny. I feel like there's several ways that I can think about that question. And I think that a lot of times before clients even come to me, they've probably have their own wake-up call,
Interesting.
They are usually in a place where they're like, I am not happy. I've been trying to see if it would just get better on its own.
Right.
It's not. I've also been feeling like, can I really have something better than this? Because a lot of times my clients come to me after they have done the big thing, right? Like they have the great career or the great job or they work at the well-known company. And so part of it is like, I'm not happy, but what do I do next? Like,
correct.
Or can I even get what I want next? Can it get better than this?
Right.
Am I going for too much? So I think that by the time they come to me, they've kind of gotten to the point where they're like, I think I can. I think I can. So once we get into the process, it's like, okay, what do you want? And how do we go after what you want without having to sacrifice the skills you've already gained, the things that you desire? And so a part of that process is really like getting clarity on what that next career move is that allows them to still show up as a top candidate for those roles while also stepping into an opportunity that is interesting and that makes them feel excited about their career again.
How do you decide, or I guess, what are your metrics to determine whether or not your coaching was successful with a client?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the best metric is them getting hired.
Right.
I mean, I never get tired of my clients being like, I got the job. But I think one of the other more underrated metrics is their confidence. Because a lot of times when you're a high achiever and you are doing these amazing things that I've just said, it's usually not really, it's like in a space of go, go, go. Like you're just go, go, go. You accomplish one thing, but you're off to the next thing, and you don't really take the time to really settle into the stuff that you've accomplished. You just kind of move forward. And the other piece is that even when you do those accomplishments, you not subconsciously think, oh, well, it wasn't that big of a deal, right? Or you might think like, it was easy, or nobody really cares about that, And so one thing that I love about the program is not only are they able to get this job, but they come out of it like, here is what I can do. And I have been downplaying my skills and I have been shortchanging myself.
Right.
And I am valuable, not just because I got lucky in my career, but because I worked hard for the opportunities that I desire. And so I think that, to me, I love the job, but I think having that confidence in yourself is something that no one can take away from you.
Right.
And especially if you're like in a toxic work environment, it's a lot of work to kind of build that back up.
Right.
But once you're there, or at least when you know what that feels like, that's yours, you know? And so I feel like that's something that they take with them into the rest of their career because they know what it feels like to be in control and to know what they have to offer.
What did you discover about millennials in the workplace? What would you say has been the biggest misconception?
I think about millennials being lazy, or it's so funny. I did an article like a couple years ago. I was featured in an article, and the publication title was like, "Millennials aren't lazy" or something like that. And I was like, that wasn't really what I was conveying, but it's true. I guess people back then thought millennials were going to be lazy, and the baby boomers spoiled us too much. And
Not at all. Are you kidding?
That was like a big thing of like, we were too coddled, and like, we're going to just be like couch surfers and like all of these things.
Whoever said that, I'm sure they regret it.
They
have to regret it.
I'm sure.
Are you kidding me?
Literally. Have you not heard that? Like, that was like a thing. Like, it was like but I guess it's the same thing like with Gen Z now, and everyone's like, Gen Z doesn't want to work. And it's like,
well, there's no jobs for them.
Yeah.
That's part of the problem. Like, they don't have a choice, which is so messed up. But nonetheless, like, I feel like it's always like big brother, big sister hating on little brother, little sister. It's like, no, we all want to work. Now, do we want to be smarter in how we work? Sure.
Yes.
But that's because also technology is here. So we're trying to maximize like our efforts. Why wouldn't we want to do that? But anyways, so that's a misconception that you found out.
That's a misconception
about millennials.
But I smile when you ask that question, because I've been seeing like these TikToks of like people talking about the millennial boss. I don't know if you've seen those.
No, tell me.
And they're like how chill and like how like calm they are, and how much they want you to enjoy your life. So they're like, it was like probably an example of like, I'm going on vacation. It's like, go, make sure you get the work done, but see you soon. Where are you headed? Like, you know, opposed to like, no, you can't go. Like what we were used to kind of thing. And so they were talking about how like at this stage, people are getting to experience the millennial boss. And I like to go through comments. And so I was looking at some of the comments, and even like the older generation, it was like, oh my gosh, like my millennial boss is my favorite boss ever. Like she really gets it. Like, and so I think that even though they might have thought that maybe millennials were lazy, I think what we're seeing is that we want to find the harmony in all of it, And so it's not that we don't want to do the work, but it's like, how can we do the work and whatever that fill in the blank is, like, and live my life and raise a family and go on vacation, like, or whatever that thing is. And I think that's what we're seeing that evolve into. I think lazy was never right, but I think that's what we're seeing it become. And I think it's been a good thing, honestly.
I think there's something to be said about, I just care about the work getting done good. It gets done good. I don't care what you do.
Yeah.
You want to go on, on a hike? You want to leave work early and go do it? Fine. But if the work is done and it's done great, we all win in this situation. Yes. Where I do think back in the day, when I was early on in the workplace, it felt like that wasn't good enough, right? And I never really liked that energy, but I have learned over time, hey, if I rather work with somebody that can get the job done great without me asking or questioning, limit me asking questions. If I don't ask questions, that means we're on a great path.
Absolutely.
That means I don't want to talk. That means we're great.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So I do think there's something about the millennial boss that we just prefer peace.
Yes.
Just do your work. And then we're done.
Literally. Because I think we've seen how we've been able to get things done. You know, like they say, oh, it takes this much time and then we get it done in 2 hours. And it's like, well, then what are we stressed about?
Right. Why are we so stressed? Like, get it done and let's move on.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. That's great insight. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about, when someone's looking to get that promotion or that raise, what should they focus on when it comes to this? Like, they're about to step into the office, have a conversation with management. What are the steps? Because I fail in this. It is really hard for me to advocate for myself, to be honest.
I think you hit the nail on the head, advocating for yourself. But I think that people miss the mark. I'm going to move this a little bit. But I think that people miss the mark with thinking that getting the promotion starts the day you walk into the room. And it doesn't start the day you walk into the room. You need to be working on that promotion at least 6 to 9 months ahead of time.
Wow.
And the reason for that is that you don't want to just say like, I want a promotion today, or it's performance review time, I'm supposed to get the promotion. Yes.
Right.
You don't want to just have that feeling without any back work, right? Like, so what you need to think about is like, first, I would recommend, depending on your manager, hopefully you have a good manager, have the conversations first. Like, tell them what you're thinking about. Like, one of my goals for the next year is to land this role in doing this. What would you suggest that I do now to prepare me for that? Or have the conversations about the results that you're bringing in, and let that be part of the forefront of the conversation, so that by the time you do get to that promotion, they're also not like, whoa, like I didn't know that was something on your radar, or like we didn't really think that this was something that is probably essential for you, whatever the case is. Like, you just want to bring them into the loop. But beyond that, I think it's important to know what results, and I like receipts. So I think it's important to have your receipts. And so that's why I say that 6 to 9 months. It doesn't always take that long depending on your company culture, but I think that you need time to build those receipts and to say, here's what I've done, and to know for yourself, like whenever you get that great email, put it into that compliments folder, lock it up, like get it in there, get more in there, and have something that you can have as a track record of, here are the results that I brought to the table. Here are the things that I've been able to prove or improve or solve that align with the promotion that I want. Because you don't want to just be like, I'm doing great things, but it has nothing to do with the leadership role that you're desiring, you know? And so show them that you're doing that. And if you haven't done that yet, I think that time before the promotion helps, because you get to think, okay, what things can I start to do to get me in alignment with that? What projects do I want to maybe take on? Or even if you're wanting to like get a raise but move to a different team, how can you show that you're ready to transition to that team? What projects can you take on that show them that you're capable of that?
Right.
And so I think having those receipts really does help, as well as bringing your boss into the loop of what you want to accomplish, so that they know and if you have a great manager, they can champion you or help you be able to get that opportunity.
What happens if your request gets declined and they're just like, no, not at this time? What happens at this point?
You leave.
I'm not mad at that.
Okay, so let me break that down though, because I don't mean just like quit the job on the spot.
Right.
Like, don't quit the job on the spot. But I couldn't help, like, literally when you said that, that's the one word that came to mind. You leave. Like, life is too short to stay where you're not appreciated.
Right.
If you've done all the things, you have the receipts, you've had the conversations, you've been told to wait for reasons unbeknownst to you.
Sure.
I think that you owe it to yourself to get curious about what else is out there.
Right.
And again, that doesn't mean burn the boats. That doesn't mean tell everyone you hate your job at the workplace, you know? But
I would not recommend that.
Please
don't do that. Don't set yourself up, please.
Please do not do that. I think there's a way to be graceful about it. And there's a way to, there's a way to be graceful about it while still taking care of yourself and prioritizing yourself. And so I do think you have two choices. You can say like, hey, this is what I do want. I see myself being here. I want to grow here. I'm excited about what we're working on. Can we talk about when this could be an option for me?
Right.
Can we discuss the timeline for that? And so if they're like, you know what, let's revisit that conversation in 6 months. You get to decide, is that fair for you? Like, do you want to revisit that conversation in 6 months? If you're like, I really like this job, I want to see what comes about in the next 6 months, then continue to do your best work, continue to show up, continue to build on your skills and your results, and then have that conversation again in 6 months. But if they tell you in that 6 month period after that they still don't have that promotion for you, I think you would do yourself a disservice by not seeing what else is out there. And again, you can do that strategically, you can do that secretly, you know, there's ways to do it that doesn't feel like you're throwing things in the wind.
I think that's the key, if that is your goal, right? Because some people, they're okay, they're great. Hey, is this consistent? Yeah. I'm treated great. I'm in a good work environment. But if your goal is to, achieve a new role and have extra zeros added, then you got to do what's best for yourself. Yeah. What do you think about title change? Do you think trying to get a title change is worth it if there's no monetary change?
I think you made a good point about going back to your goals. So what are your goals?
Right.
You know, what do you want to achieve? And I think that's an important question to think about. And that's what when I think about 6 to 9 months before, these are also things you should be thinking about. What do you want? You know, do you just want to, you know, get the title to match the work that you want to do? Do you want to just change your title because it feels right in alignment with how many years you've been in that role? Do you want more money, but you don't want to change the title? You just want to get a little bit of a pay increase.
Right.
You know, like, what do you really want? Because I think sometimes we can get caught up in what we should want, but like, what do you really want?
Right.
And so I think with the title change, if you're just feeling like, for example, you might say like, I see myself staying here for another 3 years. But when I think about what I want after those 3 years, I want to be able to do X, Y, Z. And that title change, whether I get that promotion or not, will make me feel like I am able to go after that next type of role that I want.
Right.
And so if that's your goal, then you might go for that conversation and ask for that title change and get it. And you might not get that raise with it. But I also think about that and I was like, it gets kind of tricky because if you get a title change that's like a higher level, but you're not getting a raise, you probably will still be getting more work associated with that title change. So it kind of gets a little dicey there where it's like, if that's okay with you, if you're, like, let's say you're at a high salary and you're like, I'm pretty good with this salary. So as long as I get this title change and I'm continuing to grow and my resume continues to grow, then I'm okay with that. But you have to kind of check in with yourself and say, like, what do I want and what am I okay with? Because if you're going after the title change, but you want more money and you don't get that, then you're not going to be fulfilled and you're still going to feel like something's missing.
What would you say is the biggest mistake someone can do when they are negotiating their salary?
You know what's funny? I think the biggest mistake is not negotiating. And I always...
I fall in this bracket. I never advocate for myself, but okay, go on. Okay, so
let's talk about it because
I don't know why.
Because this is what I always say: never let gratitude talk you out of your coins. And I say that because a lot of times, when you're like, I really want this job, or I really want this opportunity, or I should be lucky to have this job, you can literally luck yourself out of talking, or even asking for a salary that is comparable to your experience, you know? And so I think that one of the biggest mistakes isn't really like, if you're even willing to have the conversation, you are already ahead of most, or a lot of people, let's say that. And I think that not having the conversation is something that I think we have to talk about more because especially like, for example, in this climate where it's like, oh, the job market is crazy. And like, you might feel like, well, I'm just lucky to get the job offer. I don't want to, I don't want to push them away. I don't want to, I mean, I had a client who was like, she had a bad experience where her, one of the jobs that she had, she had an interview. They offered her the job. She negotiated this before she worked with me. She negotiated and they took away the job offer. Yeah. So she was scarred, safe to say. She was scarred. And so she ended up coming, so she ended up coming into the program. She took another job, a couple years passed, she ended up coming into the program. So she's telling me the story of like why she has a hard time negotiating. And so she was really nervous. And so by the time she does get hired for the job, she's like, okay, I don't know if I should negotiate. I'm scared. She's scared. And I think it's valid, right? Like you don't want to get to that place. But my opinion is that if a company can renege an offer because you ask for more, that's not a company that you want to be at. Yeah. Because if they're not even treating you with a decent conversation before you're officially in the company, like what are you going to go through once you're already in the job? Right. And so I told her there was no loss there, even though it felt like a painful experience. And so by the time she gets this new job offer, I'm like, okay, this is what you're going to do. You're going to negotiate, you're going to ask, you're going to do this, all of these things. And she did it. And she got like $20,000 more in her new role. Like
that is amazing.
Like she was able, and the crazy thing about it was she was already like $10,000 up from her last role.
What a
so
win.
Her new job already was offering that. And so she was like, let me go and negotiate. And they were able to pay her $10,000 more. Another client, as I'm thinking about it, she was like, I don't know if I should do this. And I was like, just do it. And because they were already paying her more than her last role. She was like, maybe I should just take it. Like, I don't want to mess things up.
Right.
And she had the conversation, and it wasn't even a negotiation. They were like, you know what, you're right. We forgot about the fact that you have this other years of experience. We're going to go ahead and add 8,000 more to that. So we'll send you the new, job offer letter soon. And that was it. So I think that you do a disservice to yourself when you don't negotiate, and not just for that moment, but even for the years to come,
right.
Because even if you stay at that role for more years, your raise is going to be based on what your base salary was.
Right.
And I always say, like, don't let gratitude talk you out of your coins, because once you're in the job doing the work, that gratitude might not be there as much as it was when you're actually in the nitty gritty of doing the work. So ask. And I always say a negotiation isn't a negotiation until they say no. So rather than being scared of them saying no, expect them to say no.
Right.
Because that's the point.
Right.
That is the negotiation.
And I love what you just said, that if a company is willing to take a job offer off the table because, you would like to get more money, you're trying to negotiate your salary, it's definitely concerning. Not sure if you want to be part of that culture.
It is concerning because they could say, hey, we don't have the ability to raise this salary. Right. And that would still be a feasible answer and a better response than just like, we're taking the offer.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that if they're not even willing to hear you out for the things that you desire, because no one's obligated to say, yes, we're going to give you so much more money.
Sure.
And that's why when you're negotiating, you do need to focus on your value and not just the quality of life that you want to have.
Right.
And so that looks like saying, here's what I know that you all are looking for in this position. I'm excited about taking this job because my experience will allow me to do X, Y, Z. Based on my research, I think that my salary is more closer to this number. Do you think that that's something that we can get closer to?
That is perfect. You put that that was perfect. That's why you do what you do. This is why you help people land great jobs and great careers. Okay, so let's talk about the workplace. Somebody is trying to find a new job. How much time should they give themselves? You know what I mean? Because we talked about, okay, you're supposed to send 20 resumes out.
Yeah.
So what is that time frame in your opinion?
Yeah. So I like to say, like, my coaching program is like a 90-day program. So it's like we have had clients land jobs within those 90 days, 3 months, some in a shorter amount of time. But again, I think that is not a guarantee because
of course,
a lot of that is based on the company as well, the company that you're going after, how high you're going up in the level of your next role. Like if you're going after more VP role, there might be a longer hiring process there compared to if you're going after like a junior level role.
Sure.
And so I think when you're thinking about what that next stage of your career looks like and how long it might take, I recommend giving yourself 3 to 6 months at least. And that doesn't mean that it has to take that long, but be gracious with yourself. And when I think about that time, that also doesn't mean that you have to spend every single hour looking for a job. Like, I think that leads to burnout, that leads to discouragement, that leads to your confidence going down the drain when you're getting those rejections. Right. And so even though it might be a 3 to 6 month timeline, be mindful of how you're spending your time, because filling every waking hour with an application is not going to serve you either.
How important are resumes nowadays?
I think it's important.
Okay.
I think it's important in the sense of it's still a skill that allows you to identify the accomplishments that you bring to the table when done correctly. I think the mistake is that I see a lot of really qualified high achievers either downplay their skills in their resume, not own up to things they've done because they did it once or twice or because they did it with the team. And on the flip side, I see really qualified high achievers stuff their resumes with every single thing they've ever done, which leads to confusion, which leads to people maybe thinking that they're great where they are and not clear on why they're ready for that next step. And so I think that resumes they still have a place because it tells a story. It lets people know, what have you done that makes you ready for this next stage. But when we're doing it thoughtlessly, it definitely can feel like a waste of time, especially if you're constantly editing your resume and it's not getting you anywhere.
What's the number one thing that should be on a resume to help it stand out?
You know, I don't necessarily think there's one thing, because I do feel like it's a combination of a couple of things.
Sure.
But I think number one to start, the foundation of a good resume should be based upon the roles that you desire next. And I think that is a mistake that a lot of people make, where it's like, I want a new job. Let me update my resume. I mean, I think that's like, I don't know who started that step one rule.
Right.
But that's not step one. And step one should be, what role do I want next? Because once you know what role you want next, you can decide what accomplishments you want to tell to showcase that you're ready for that job. And so I guess my answer to that would be the one thing, is where it's like, let me just update my resume. Because what happens when you update your resume just because you're ready for a new job is you end up filling your resume with all the things you're proud of.
Sure.
You're like, I've done all these amazing things. And I'm so happy about that, right? But the things that you're proud of might not get you the job that you want next if they're not relevant. And so being able to look at, what do I want next and what are they asking of me? What experience do I need to show to share with them that I can do what they need?
Right.
That should be the starting point, so that then you can craft a story that is necessary for them to say, hey, this sounds like what we're looking for.
I love that. So technically, a resume is you crafting a story. A very important story.
Yes.
That needs, time and effort. So if someone's like trying to put their resume together and they just don't know where to start, where do they go? Or do you have tips, or just like, how do they begin?
So I say start with figure out what you want to do next, right? So let's say you're like, I want to be a digital marketing manager, right? Making it up. And then, so you go look for these job descriptions and say, what are they asking for in these roles?
Right.
So you'll look at it, you'll say, oh, they keep asking for this, and they keep asking for this, and they keep asking for that. And then literally write that down. These are the skills that they keep asking for. And then you want to look at your experience and say, when have I done that? Like, what are the things that I've done that? And look at each role that you've had and say, when have I done that? Because I think that a lot of times resumes feel so hard and boring, because it's like, let me get this bullet together. Like, let me get this bullet has to say this many words, and it has to have this specific orchestrated and managed and all of these things. But instead, look at your experience as, this is me. Like, what have I done? When was the last time, like if you're looking for a digital marketing manager role, it's like, when was the last time I worked on a paid ad campaign? Oh, I did it then. This is what I did. This is what it looked like. Okay, let me write that down. But instead of like, I have to write this down in the perfect bullet the first time because this is why I need to do this, just write out what you did. And then you can go back and say, okay, let me make this a nice bullet. But I think when you're trying to say, how do I make this the best bullet right away and make this sound good with all the right keywords, then then it does feel really stressful, because that's not really how you think about yourself or anything for that matter, honestly.
How does someone prepare for a job interview? I mean, well, I'm sure there's a lot of things, but the main thing you would want someone to focus on before they go into that job interview.
I would say one of the things I would say don't do is don't rehearse all of your answers.
Really?
Yes. I don't think you should rehearse all your answers. And here's why. Because, and this is coming from a type A, a type A person. So I know the feeling of, I have to get this right. Recovering perfectionist. So I know the feeling of like, I have to say this perfectly. But what happens when you rehearse your interview responses, you end up in the interview, you either end up beating yourself up when you don't say it exactly how you rehearsed it, even though they don't know.
Right.
They don't know that you practiced to say memorable and you didn't say memorable, and now you're upset with yourself. And so then you end up feeling frustrated or even flustered in the interview because you're like, oh, I'm off track. When really you're not. No one knows what you practice in the mirror. But then the other piece of that is why rehearsing isn't the best, is because you get kind of drill down on how to say this one thing, or you drill down on how to answer this one specific question or these 5 specific questions. And then you get in the interview and they ask you none of those questions, or they ask you a question that's completely something off the script. And then you feel flustered again because you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't prepare for this. What do I say? This is not what I prepared for. And then you have all those internal thoughts of like, I'm messing this up. This is not good. I'm not going to get this job, which kind of snowballs into you maybe not getting the job because you didn't get to show up the best version of yourself because you weren't in it. You were focused or in your head. So I don't think you should rehearse.
Man, wow.
But let me say, that doesn't mean don't come prepared.
Correct. I was going to say, definitely, take the notes, understand the workplace or where you're going. Because, I sit on both sides. I'm an employee and I'm also an employer.
Yeah.
And it gets really hard if someone steps into a job interview and they don't know what's going on.
Oh, like my worst.
Man.
I've interviewed a number of people as well in my previous roles and in my current business. And the worst thing that someone can ask is like, what does your company do? Oh, that is the worst thing that you can ask.
Yes. So would you say that is the one thing you don't want to do in a job interview is not be prepared?
Yes.
Do your homework.
Do your homework. And again, so for me, I am the type of person that I am a writer. I have a Forbes column and I'm always writing. So I like to write. Like I will write everything out. And if you are a writer and you like to write it all out. Doesn't mean don't write it all out.
Sure.
But then go back and say, okay, what are the main points? Bullet point. What are the main things you want to make sure you articulate in this interview? If you have stories that you want to tell, just bullet it. Like, I want to tell the story about that time where I worked on that ad or whatever the case is. Like, bullet point those stories for yourself so that you have like a short form list that you can recall in your head.
Right.
But don't script it, but also don't come unprepared.
Absolutely. Okay, so what is a question that someone should ask in a job interview? And I think it's so interesting because a lot of times we hear, it's more of the employers setting the tone, but really you should be asking when you're going in for a job interview the questions that you need answers to. So what's an important question to ask?
I think there's a lot of questions. And like, for example, inside my Career Defined coaching program, I give you like at least 20 plus questions. Wow. And not that you have to ask all of those questions, but those questions are kind of like sectioned off based off of what's important to you.
Sure.
So like, for example, if you're looking for a remote job, there are certain questions you want to ask about that. If you are really caring about the culture that you're walking into, there are certain questions you want to ask about that. If you are leading a team and want to make sure that you can do that it's the right environment for you to lead that team, there's questions you want to ask about that. And so I think that you should think about what do you really want out of that role, because I think that the worst thing you can do is not ask any questions. And because when you do ask questions, it shows that you are interested. Correct, and people want to hire people who are interested in the job. Like they don't just want to take a chance on you. They want to know that you care about what you want to do. And by asking questions, you show that you're really invested in where you're going to be working. And so I think that you should always ask questions. And I think that you should think about what is important to you. So for example, even as you go into the interview process, there's different questions you want to ask. Sure. So for example, if you're in the phone interview, you might want to ask a little bit more about the role because the recruiter might not really know a lot about the team dynamic, but they know a lot about the role, right? So you might want to ask questions about like, if you could describe the role in your own words, like how would you describe this role? And just to get a understanding of maybe how they see the things that you need to be doing in this position. But then when you get into the hiring manager role, you might want to say like, you might want to ask about the culture. What are some of I read online, just doing my own research, that these certain things are really important for the growth of the team or for, in the way that you guys collaborate. But could you tell me in your own words, like, does that align with what you see being important for this team? Or could you tell me what is important to you? Like, get into them and get an understanding of like what they really see as a culture fit, because then you can use that for the next interview where you're like, hey, I talked to Sally and Sally said that this is really important and I'm super excited about that. Can you tell me more about like your experience or your perspective? So I think it all depends on, again, what are you really wanting? But I think to that point, you should not ask leading questions. And so leading questions are questions that hint at the answer you want to know. And so that might be, this is a really basic question. You should not ask this in general, but I mean, you could, but you might say like, how often do people leave at 5 p.m.?
Right.
Of course, the person's like, oh, this person wants to be able to leave at 5 p.m. So here's the answer. So that I think you're a great candidate. I don't want to steer you away. Like, here's the answer that you should. Most times it's 5 p.m. Like, you're telling them essentially what you want the answer to be. And so instead you want to ask open-ended questions. And so that might look like, can you give me an example of how diversity and inclusion, I mean, that's a whole, we don't even need to get into that. But if diversity and inclusion is important to you, you can say, like, can you give me an example of how diversity and inclusion is embraced here? I pause for a second because we're seeing so many different things changing with diversity and inclusion, which is disheartening. But I think that, if that's important to you, for example, you want to ask an open-ended question, ask for examples, ask for their perspective, opposed to asking questions that are yes or no, because that leads to them giving you the answer you want to hear. And oftentimes you'll have people say, like, I asked all the questions and they told me the right answers, and that's not what I'm experiencing. And it's probably because you might have asked leading questions that led them to say what you wanted, which, it's not really...
Totally makes sense.
And I don't think that anyone's trying to be dishonest, but if they're like really excited about hiring you and they want you to have a good impression, then they're more likely to say things that aren't necessarily the 100% true. Right.
What are some red flags in a job interview where you're just like, run? If they say this, run.
I think that if they're asking inappropriate questions, or if they're like, what are your plans to raise a family? Like, I think that's an inappropriate question.
Absolutely.
I think
oh my!
Especially if you're a woman,
Absolutely.
like those probing questions, that kind of create bias, I think should never be on the table.
Right.
Especially for like Black women or Black people or minorities, because you already walk in with a bias. You walk in Black, and so anything that adds to your uncomfortability should never be ignored. And I think that there are lots of red flags that people experience, but they don't trust their gut enough, or they're in a space where you're like, I have to just take this job. But I think they're there. And so I think another subtle thing is, like, if you're in a panel interview and they're interacting in a very strange way, or if they're like, or one person's cutting off someone else when they're talking, or they're being passive aggressive to each other, take note, because that's your team.
That is a really
that is
good
your team.
Point. Absolutely. Wow. I didn't even think of that, but that is a clear giveaway at that moment. Yeah, they don't like each other.
They don't like each other.
This is weird.
Or if you're like, what is your favorite thing about working here? And they're like, that is a good question. Oh my gosh, that's so good.
I'll get back to you about that. Run.
They don't like their job.
Right.
They don't like it.
How long should someone follow up, with a job? Or better yet, should someone follow up after an interview?
Absolutely. I recommend sending a thank you note. I feel like thank you notes.
I love this.
I feel like thank you notes are so outdated.
But hearing this, I love it. I love it.
I love a good thank you note. And I think when we're thinking about the competition and standing out, any little thing that you do that is what no one else is doing,
right?
You're literally, that's the definition of standing out. You're
right.
standing out. So taking a few moments of your day, and again, some people don't like this. Some people are like, I'm not sending out thank you note. Hey, suit yourself. But that's why it works, because no one else is sending thank you notes.
The day someone sends me a thank you note.
Can you imagine? I've done interviews and I've waited for thank you notes, and I've gotten very few.
I don't think I've ever gotten any.
And listen, if you don't want to send it's okay. But I do think
it helps stand you out.
It does. But what it also does is it reaffirms why, in that email, you can reaffirm why you are a great candidate for the job.
Right.
So it's not just saying thank you. It's like, thank you for this interview. I really enjoyed the conversation. Here's what I learned. And I'm excited about my ability or the possibility of me being able to do X, Y, Z. Right?
So great.
You show people like, oh, you really listened in this interview. You really care about the role. And then you give them a paper trail to go back to say, here's why we should hire this person. So it works. It works in your favor.
For sure. Do you feel like AI, when we're watching artificial intelligence, really impact the workplace right now? And should people be concerned and be mindful to learn new skills to put on their resume to compete in this landscape where things are really shifting second by second at this point?
I think it's a tricky question because I feel like it's so, at least in my opinion, I think it's still super new. And so I think there's always that fear of something new wiping out the old, right? And so I do think there's some things that, you know, AI can do in terms of like helping you, just like being able to be an assistant to what you're doing. But I think that humans, or your ability to bring your humanity to things, to bring your stories, your background, your specific experience to things.
That's right.
It is hard to compete with that. And so I think when we think about the basic skills, that could be at risk in some ways, depending on your industry and where you work.
Right.
But if you're able to find ways to bring yourself, and that doesn't mean you have to like bring your whole personality or whatever, but just like your own ideas, your own creativity, your own perspectives, and things that only maybe you can offer, then I think that you'll always be at an advantage. And so I think that that's a good place to keep at the forefront of your mind. Yes, develop skills. Like you want to continue to grow. You want to continue to be competitive, even if that means competing with AI. But at the end of the day, always remember to bring that in there. Because what we're even seeing with, like, for example, AI and cover letters. I read an article how companies are starting to notice when a candidate uses AI for a cover letter.
Really?
Yes. And the reason for that is there's no heart in it.
Right.
You know, like,
you could totally tell.
Yeah, there's no heart in it. And someone might be thinking, well, I just want to get a job. Like, it's just too much. And I get you. Right. I understand. But there's something to be said about being able to be genuinely interested in something and being able to portray why. You know, like AI can probably help you craft great paragraphs. But if you're not in it, then even if you get that interview, once you get into that interview, they're going to be like, this is not the same person that I thought I read about on paper.
It's not matching up.
It's not matching.
The math ain't happening.
And it happens. It happens.
Yeah.
I had a client who she got a job, or she was able to move forward. She's now a manager. And she was telling me how she was not hiring. And she had like 400 applications. And she was like, maybe 70 were worth looking at. And she was like, and then even when she didn't move on to the interview process, she was like, I just wanted to have some conversations with people who I didn't really love their resume, but I wanted to talk to them. And there were some people who she loved their resume, but by the time she got on the phone with them, she was like, this is not
the same person.
You.
I don't even know who you are.
This is not you. And it's like nothing to be said about the 400 people who applied. I'm sure they're all great. But it's about how are you telling that story? And AI cannot tell your story better than you.
It can help maybe structure it out a little, maybe give you a little outline to help you, but it's got to be you. It's got to be your heart, because you can feel that for sure. I want to talk about maneuvering in a challenging work environment. Okay, so let's assume, first, before we get to that, how important is a performance review? How should someone look at it? Do you know what I mean? Is it just I got to get this performance review done? It's just another to-do on my list. But should we be taking performance reviews more serious?
As far as the employees?
Yes.
I think that it depends.
Like, does it matter?
So I think that anything that can verify or diminish whatever you're going to ask for later matters.
Gotcha.
Right? So if you're like, I want a raise, or I want a promotion, or, you know, any of those things. So let me start there. If you want a raise, if you want a promotion, if you see yourself growing in this environment and you want things that come with that, then you don't want to do anything to sabotage that. And so that even if that's like a silly performance review, if that's how you see it, even if it feels silly, make sure that that silly performance review shows how you are amazing and how you're doing great things.
Yeah.
You know, because when it comes time to ask for what you want, you don't want anything to fall back on you where they're like, well, that performance review showcased XYZ, so we're not sure if you're ready for that, or you might want to wait a little bit longer for that.
Right.
And so I think that it is something that you should take seriously enough that in a way that matters to you.
Gotcha.
You know, like if depending, because every performance is different. You might have some that are more like surveys. You might have some where you have to come into the office and have, you know, and speak with 360. Like you have to go speak with different people and get their opinion on how you've been. Like every company is different. But I think that, again, know what your goals are and make sure that there's nothing that you're doing to show that you're not ready for that, including that performance review.
And how serious should employers take it?
I think it depends. I think there's an argument for performance reviews being outdated and not actually moving the needle on the real goals that matter to both employees and even senior leadership. Mm-hmm. I think that those performance reviews should have some backings behind it. So people shouldn't just be doing performance reviews for candy and pizza. You know, like they should be doing it to get things out of it, to get more clarity, to get more opportunities, to get more alignment, you know? And so, but I think that if it doesn't matter to the employer, then it shouldn't necessarily matter to the employee either.
Right.
But I'm always one of never allowing anything to stand in your way if you can control it as an employee. So that's why I gave that initial answer. But I think that a lot of times for some companies, it could just be a routine thing that doesn't really mean anything. Like you have a great performance review and then you still don't get that promotion.
Right.
And so I think that can also be disheartening for employees who are like, why does this even matter?
Right.
And so I do think there should be something behind it, you know, something that
substance behind
for
a reason. It
that incentivizes people.
Right. Okay. So how does someone deal with a conflict that they might have with management? What would you tell them? Someone's going, okay, I just can't stand XYZ. Mm-hmm. I got that. It's a serious issue. What should I do?
They have an issue with their manager.
Yeah, management in general.
Because management and manager is different.
Ooh, break it down.
Because management could be like the senior leadership. Like you have a problem with how the senior leadership goes about things. Like the culture of the executives is just not, anytime they walk into the room or anytime, you know, like that kind of thing.
Right.
But then the issue with your manager could be like, my manager is toxic. Like this is my issue with my manager. So it does depend on how that is, what's going on.
Okay, so let's talk about like just management.
Okay. So
you can't change it.
Okay.
You got to find another job. I feel like that's what you want to say. But I mean,
think that, so here's the thing, because an easy answer could be like, go to HR.
Right.
But HR doesn't work for you.
We were going to get to that. HR, yes, go ahead.
HR doesn't work for you. They work for the company. Mm-hmm. So I think that's when it gets tricky, especially when we think about being, you know, the only Black person or the only Latina person or the only anything, right? I think that gets really tricky because it's easy to not only be singled out in that toxic environment, but for that to be escalated in a situation where nothing really gets fixed. So I think when you think about the issues that you might have with management, I think that it depends. Because if you're at a larger organization where you only really interact with management every now and then it might be something that you don't mind. Like let's say you only interact with your management team once a quarter, but your team is great. You love your team, you love your boss. That might be something that you don't mind dealing with.
Right.
But if it's like you work at a small company and the management team is always around and they're insufferable, then you might really need to consider going somewhere else.
Right.
Because I don't think that that's going to change.
Right.
Particularly whether you leave or not.
Right. For sure. Well, it leads us to the next question. Is HR on the side of the company or employee? And it's really important people understand this. Be honest with us.
I think that HR is on the side of the company. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that they don't care about the people. And I mean, we see that with like people operations or, just different titles and roles that try to, or even like employee engagement or like things like that.
I agree.
To cultivate a culture or foster an environment. But when we think about HR, I think that HR, the kind of HR experience you will have depends on the overall culture of the company. So and I think it starts with culture, because if you're going into a good culture where they care about the people, it's a people-centered, people-first environment, then the HR team, even though they're for the company, their goal is in alignment with the people.
Absolutely.
So you're going to get a whole different experience from HR, even though technically their job is in the benefit of the company. But for them, the benefit of the company is you being engaged and you feeling fulfilled and you feeling safe, right? But then if we have a culture that is toxic, that is rigid, that is, not, that just kind of cares about you getting the job done, but really doesn't care about you at all,
right,
then the HR team is going to reflect that. And that doesn't mean that every single person on the HR team is going to feel that way. But at the end of the day, their goal will always be in benefit of the company. So it is to serve you best, find a company that's in benefit of you, right? That fosters a people-first environment, or that at least has an environment in alignment with your goals, whatever those goals are.
Right. Okay, final question. You love your job, you love it so much, but you hate your coworkers.
Ooh.
What do you do in this situation?
Work remote.
That's so good. I love that.
If you can, work remote. If you like your job, you like your...
Not like, love.
You love your job.
You love it all, but you just don't want to be around your coworkers.
But I do have to say, if you don't like your coworkers, do you love your job as much? You might like your work. You might like the work you do, but if we're thinking about coworkers, we're thinking about your team members, thinking about probably your boss, we're thinking about all of them get on your nerves. Like you just happen to tap on it every day. Like then you might not like your job as much, but the fact that you like your work is a sign that either you can manage it, by working remotely and having, meetings very sparingly if you can have it. Or it's a sign that if you really aren't really that happy, but you really, really love your work, that you can find another place where you can do that work.
Such great insight. Okay, so how do people get coaching from you? Where can someone go sign up? They want to take courses. They want to learn from you. Where should they go?
Yes. So I have a Career Defined program where I work with mid to senior level corporate professionals on how to transition into a new role they'll love without starting over, settling for less. That is a big thing. And so if you're interested in that, I would recommend going to my website, employeeredefined.com, and then you'll see details on the coaching. If you want, to kind of get a sneak peek of how I support, I feel like this was a pretty good sneak peek, but if you want another sneak peek, I do have a free class that is like a 90-minute class on how to kind of like I talk about some of the things we talked about today and how to get that senior role. What does it look like? First 3 things you should do. And so if you want that, you can go to my Instagram at The New Employees. And then you can DM me class and I'll send you the details for that.
That is so awesome. And where can people read, and keep up with your work? Because I know you just you write and you do have a column. So where can people just keep up with your great insight?
Yes. I mean, the easiest thing I would say is if you Google Forbes and my name, it will come up, which is probably the simplest thing. But you can also go to my Instagram. I have a lot of, I have the link in my bio to my Forbes column, and I have a lot of articles that I share on my feed that you can kind of search through and find as well.
I love this. I'm so happy, and I love that you made your dreams come true.
Thank you.
And it does good work. I'm always in awe of people who can do something they love and it also gives back, right? Because you want to see people in great positions.
Yeah.
You want to see somebody, negotiate that salary and get more than what they expected. You want people to win.
Yeah.
And I love that is the core of what you do. That is so amazing. And I'm so happy for you because not a lot of people, first off, can, be clear on their dreams, but let alone it do good.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Thank you so much. It is literally, it's such a priceless feeling to be able to, like, I went through the trenches in my toxic job, you know, but to be able to see the value in it and to see how it's impacting so many other people and to know that because I went through those things, I'm able to relate so much more. I truly understand the ups and downs and the setbacks and the internal turmoil and all of the things that come with where you might be at when you're ready for that next transition. And so it's just such a blessing to be able to create this experience for others and for them to be able to see their own light and for them to be able to see that they always had the power to change their careers and to change their lives. So yeah, I love it.
That's amazing. And again, the website, just give us,
EmployeeRedefined.com. Redefine your career. Okay. If that helps you remember.
Because that's what we need.